everyone, and welcome to a super special episode of the Illuminary Library. Of course, I am Alicia, and today I am joined by my co-host Ben,
Hey, folks.
along with Brandon
What's up?
and Teddy.
What's going on, guys?
And we have been asked on social media through our Patreon, the WIGS, to do like a little deck building episode for Lorcana. And Ben and I surprisingly are not great at deck building. So we decided to bring in two people who actually know what they're doing. So Brandon, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, talk about who you are, what you do, your connection to Lorcana, everything.
Sure. So my name's Brandon, also known as BSquared. I run a YouTube channel that's just at BSquared24. I basically make a lot of videos revolving around most things Lorcana, a lot of news, a lot of deck techs and deck building videos, some product opening here and there. And so that's pretty much it for now. I do a little bit of commentating on the side, but that's kind of its own thing. So other than that, yeah, that's me.
And Teddy?
So I'm one of the hosts for the Glimmer podcast. We are a competitive-based podcast for Lorcana. We also do different YouTube videos and stuff on different deck building. Brandon's actually an honorary member of the Glimmer podcast, which is really cool. I got the shirt. He's got his own shirt.
Nice.
We do all things competitive for Lorcana, and that's kind of our main focus.
And that's kind of why we wanted to bring both of you into this video, because I feel like being in that scene, you have a pretty good pulse on what decks are competitive right now, but also all of the different decks that we've seen and how they're being modified over time, which is kind of really an important aspect for building. So let's get into just the basics of what is a deck, what's required just, for a standard competitive deck. So it's 60 colors. It's 2 inks.
60 cards.
60. Oh my God, what did I just say?
You
Yeah,
said
60 cards.
Like, holy cow. Yeah, I'm playing Chartreuse
so many.
Periwinkle today, guys.
Yeah. I don't think I could name that many colors.
So 60 cards, but that's the minimum requirement. So you could have more. Don't be that guy that has like 2,000 though. Like we all beg you, don't be that guy. 2 inks. And then 4 copies of each specific card. So you could have multiple aerials, but you can only have one aerial voiceless, perhaps, you know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Ben, they came out with starter decks when the game first came out. There were 3 different kinds, which is, I think, a really good way to kind of get into the start of the game. Do you want to kind of expand on what those were, what they have, how do they play, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I got a decent amount of time with this, helping folks do the Learn to Play at Gen Con. So the Ruby Emerald deck is mainly about playing evasive characters that are easy for you to challenge other characters with and quest with, but hard for your opponent to actually answer and challenge back. The whole point of evasive being only evasive characters can challenge other evasive characters. It also does a good job of trying to control the board with some direct removal and some bounce actions that'll return your opponent's stuff back to their hand. To just try and help you maintain control of the game and get ahead with a couple of high quest cards, or high lore pip cards that help you quest for a lot of lore to close the game out. It is, from what I've seen, one of the more challenging ones to pilot. There's a lot of decision making and also a lot of, from what I saw, bad draws the deck can spit out, where you just end up in a situation where it's difficult to be able to do much of anything. But at the same time, I've seen it do some absolutely phenomenal comebacks and end up in some states where you just have a bunch of evasive creatures and your opponents have no answer for it.
I like high-key love evasives, so I think this was my favorite starter deck just because I really enjoyed that mechanic. But I can see what you're saying about it being a little bit challenging to pilot. I think that the Sapphire Steel is still harder personally, but
that's fair.
Do you guys have
opinions
on linear? But I'd love to hear other folks' opinions too, for sure.
Yeah,
I think for Ruby Emerald, the issue is it doesn't have any draw, and obviously, like, there isn't that much draw in Lorcana yet that like is outside of that has like you have the Queen, which is an Amethyst card that's a 5 cost and it's not in a starter deck. You have you have forgotten me. A Whole New World is a steel card, but that's a 7 cost. So like you it's harder to get draw, and especially in a starter deck, it's going to be harder to fill those cards in. And obviously, like in the Amber Amethyst deck, you have like Frenzy on the other side and Maleficent Sorceress, which the draw is built. Amethyst is like a card or a color that has draw. Like that's just its characteristic from the first set. So I think the issue with the Emerald Ruby deck is its just inability to draw cards consistently. I think is probably the hardest thing to do. Like you at a point in the game, unless like you've like run away from your opponent early game, you're gonna get to a point where you're just top decking, and no one wants to get there. But like Alicia, you said, like if you can get evasives on the board, the only other card is, I believe, the Jetsam in Amethyst. It's one of the Jetsam or Flotsam in Amethyst that has evasive.
Jetsam.
It is Jetsam. Okay. So, and obviously Jetsam can give Flotsam evasive. So, like, you have those evasive threats, but there really are no evasive threats. And I think that's what if you can get evasives going, that's what makes this deck so good. Because I'm not sure if Sapphire does have Let It Go in it, which I don't believe it does.
I don't think so.
I don't think it does.
That's the one that turns the character into ink, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
that's
unless people are playing, because like Pongo's an evasive, he can't. He has to have 2 Fire the Cannons or 1 Smash go into him, which there's only 5 of those combined. And then there's another. I believe, is Goofy in the deck? Is Goofy? I don't believe Goofy's in the deck.
Not in the starter deck, no.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It's Peter Pan and Pongo, I think, are the 2 evasives.
Yeah. So, like, if you get enough of those out, you should be well on your way to being able to, like, outquest your opponent, unless they can come up. Unless you're playing another Ruby Emerald with the hard removal in Mother of Snow's Best and Dragonfire, or if they are able to hit their smashes and cannons as well.
Brandon, what's your take on this one?
I agree in the sense of I think it's one of the more difficult to pilot, mainly because there's a couple win conditions that you have in Ruby Emerald, because you can do the evasive thing. It's also a bit more control-y of a deck as well out of the 3, just in the sense of you have your Dragonfires, your Mother Knows Best. You also have a lot of lore stealing stuff with the Aladdin Heroic Outlaw and the Rapunzel. But just like Teddy said, draw is super important, especially in the starter deck matchups. And Mad Hatter's the only draw, and it's conditional draw basically up to your opponent. And on top of that, I think that starter deck has the most uninkable cards out of all of the other starter decks. So it's really easy to like get a handful of uninkable cards. I've had hands in starter deck tournaments when the game first released where I just had like a handful of 4 uninkables and couldn't get a 5th ink to start actually playing the cards, and it just feels so bad. Yeah, so it can be a really strong deck. I think at Gen Con it performed really well, at least with the people that I knew that played it. But yeah, definitely high skill ceiling out of the starter decks for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's move on to the Sapphire Steel. I can say words.
Because we kind of already talked a little bit about that here. So Sapphire Steel's main goal or grab is that the Sapphire has a lot of referred to generally as ramp spells, things that let you get ink in play faster than the normal 1 per turn. And then you take advantage of that to play more expensive and therefore more powerful cards earlier than your opponent can. With I believe the big top end in here being Maui at that giant 8 cost 8/8. It just bullies the board. And then there's also a decent amount of damage-based removal from Steel. Fire the Cannons and Smash are both in here. And I forget, does this have any of the Steel-based draw effects? Like
Does not.
No, and it has a lot of filter stuff. I think it has Ransack, and I think there's one more. I don't know what else it has. Oh, the Develop Your Brain, but that's not Steel.
Yeah, well, not quite draw, but selection at least. It helps you find
Yeah.
what you're trying to do. It does have a little bit of heal as well with the coconut
Natural as
basket.
well. Yeah.
And golden flower as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of designed for getting those big things out, preventing your opponent from going too quick too early, and then letting those big things kind of close the game out for you.
I'm gonna say it. I hate this deck. I hate this.
This is my favorite.
So if anyone goes and watches our like learn to play video that we shot at Gen Con, this was the deck that I was playing, and it was my first taste of really like playing the game like a full round, and I got decimated with this thing. To be fair, I didn't fully understand the ramp, and I think I drew poorly as well. So I wasn't necessarily triggering the ramp. But if you don't get that, like I did in the video, you aren't playing a lot of cards. So your opponent's getting out, you know, whether it's the Ruby Emerald or the Amber Amethyst, they're getting out a lot of characters who are able to quest with a lot of lore pips, and you're sitting there with like a board of nothing. So I don't know. It feels like if you lose with this one, it's like a very punishing loss. And it has always left a bad taste in my mouth since then, and I avoid these colors like the plague. So sorry, Lorcana, I'm not playing Sapphire or Steel apparently.
I can empathize completely with Alicia because for somehow, I don't know how, but like every single starter deck tournament that I was a part of, I got this deck. And I just became so tired of playing this deck. Like, I knew every card in and out. I knew what my win condition was. Like, I basically knew by turn 2 or 3 if I was going to win the game. And I just, by the time, I was so over it by like 2 or 3 weeks into the game being out. So I just haven't really touched that combination of colors because of that.
That's fair.
You know,
so what is your win condition?
It's kind of like you said. It's like you either hit the ramp and you ramp into big stuff, and your opponent has a difficult time dealing with it because it's just they have a lot of willpower and quest for 3 lore. I'm thinking of things like the Maleficent and the Mufasa that are in the deck, and then of course the Maui. And then if you don't hit that, which is difficult because you're trying to ramp early, right? Like on turn 2, you're trying to play Grammatala. I don't remember if One Jump Ahead is in the deck or not, but if you can sing that on turn 3, you try to do that. If Mickey is in there, you try to do that as well. But then, if you don't hit any of that, then you kind of have to hope that you can switch from a ramp mentality to a aggressive like lore questing mentality and playing things like Jasmine and your other 2 lore mid-range type characters and try to race your opponent, which is like a 180 switch on what you were trying to do initially. So it's extremely punishing if you draw like the stuff that you need to draw, or if your opponent just like gets out ahead of you and there's nothing you can do about it.
Teddy, what were you gonna say?
I'm looking down at my deck box right now, and you'll never guess what color is in there.
Is it actually, Sapphire?
Yeah, I built out a Steel Sapphire deck,
Nice.
like with full cards at Gen Con. But at least for the starter deck, this was my favorite to play. I'll have to
oh my gosh.
respectfully disagree.
We got a 50-50 split on the room here. I love it.
We do.
I think something that like when I was like analyzing these before Gen Con and getting ready for the starter tournament, unfortunately I got Amber Amethyst, which I believe is the second best deck. I think it's this, then Amber Amethyst, then Ruby Emerald. But the pure strength and the lore stats and lore quality with this deck is why it makes it so good, because you necessarily don't have to ramp to win, I believe. Because turn 2 you can go Aurora, turn 3 you can go Jasmine, turn 4 you can go the smaller Maleficent. Turn 5, you can go a big Aurora, and then by then you have, after you can go with your ramp and stuff. But then you also have the ability to play the big Maleficent, the big Symbolator. Scar has 2, Mufasa has 3, the other Simba has 2, the Beast has 2. The lore quality in this deck, I believe, is. When I saw it, I'm like, this seems a little too overpowered, and like the ramp is always nice. Like obviously, like that's kind of like how I went about it. But just like when you get basically by the time you're turn 5, unless like you have no cards in hand and like you have to just play like a 1 lore value character, you're playing characters that are 2 or 3 lore, and in a starter deck tournament where it's harder to do things, you're gonna run away right away.
Mm-hmm.
And I think and also with removal, there's also 1 grab the swords in the deck, and with grab your swords, and with all like the smaller characters being played, 2 damage is a lot, and like that can clear a board pretty quickly. But no, this was my favorite deck. I could go on and on about this deck. I immediately fell in love with it when I saw it, and it was really, I got it, and like I went to a like release kickoff event and did well with it. And like by like the second game I was playing, it's like Brandon, like I knew what I had to do to win. I knew exactly what I had to do to win, and like. But I think that's like just something that goes along with deck building. Like you're gonna see like, did I get this combo down like early enough? And if you do, then you have a higher chance of winning. And like obviously you still can come back, but I think with this deck, it was like, to me, it was pretty cut and clear on where you had to go and like what I had to do to get to each win condition.
Okay, so can we meet in the middle and say that the Amber Amethyst is like at least good? Like,
yeah, oh yeah,
we
yeah.
can say that one's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say it's the best.
I agree.
I liked it personally. And I think that like the overall consensus of people that I've talked to, at least at Gen Con, people were like really loving this deck. So Ben, do you want to give us the overview? It's got my girl Moana in it, which also helps it a lot.
So this is the one that I saw making people the most upset when they were sitting across.
Oh.
I'll say that.
Okay.
Like this is the one where it's like, how am I supposed to do anything when you're doing all of that? It has the most card draw out of any of the starter decks, with the friends on the other side, as well as the Maleficent that when it comes in draws a card. There's you've got Sorcerer Mickey and the Brooms, which if you can get that combo off to start recurring them is really good. I believe this also has, I don't have the list in front of me, the upgraded Facilier, the one that also lets you recur.
Recursion Facilier,
Which, if you combine that with the Rafikis that are in the deck, allow you to just ruin your opponent's day. It's like, play this, challenge your character. I don't care that I lose the challenge. It goes back to my hand. Play it again. Finish the job. It's like, okay, great. But between that amount of card draw and that just card advantage from having your stuff not die properly, not get banished properly, I should say, then it's just really strong when it works. That being said, when you don't get those pieces, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Some of the characters in here are pretty small, pretty weak, don't quest for a lot of lore on their own. I'm looking, there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 or 7 different characters in here that all have 1 lore pip at a minimum. I think it just the list keeps going of how little lore you can get in here. But the goal of the deck is not quality but quantity. You're supposed to have a lot of things on the board at one time, and then use that to have turns where you just turn everybody sideways, quest for a bunch, and get halfway to winning the game. What have y'all seen of
speak to this
this
one,
deck?
Brandon? Yeah.
So I agree. I personally think it's the best starter deck out there. I think it's the easiest to pilot out of the starter decks too. Like if a person who's never played a TCG or even has never played Lorcana wants to play a test game, I'll give them this deck because it does a lot of really good things. It teaches the player the value of questing versus challenging, which I find even some like veteran TCG players, it takes a second for them to figure out because challenging or attacking or whatever that version is in most other games is usually so important. And in this game, it is like very tempo based. You might lose a lot of tempo if you spend all your time challenging. So it kind of teaches people that. But yeah, like the only semi board wipe thing between these three is the one grab your sword and sapphire steel. And so if you can just throw your hand onto the table and like it sticks, you basically win the game. And even with Ruby Emerald's evasive package, you can outpace them if they're trying to do that and just play a bunch of evasives. A lot of the Amber Amethyst stuff comes down really early. Like it's just a lot of 1 to 3 drop units with decent lore. And then, like Ben said, if you see Dr. Facilier hit the board and your opponent like halfway knows how to utilize him, you've lost the game, because unless you draw Dragonfire or something that can get rid of it, just for sitting there, like you lost the game. Everything that gets challenged is going right back onto the board. It's almost impossible to take out. Obviously, you can like not draw well. I wouldn't say it's like overpowered, but I definitely think it's the easiest to pilot and the best out of the three, for sure.
For me, this is the one I said this earlier. I got this at Gen Con, and it was interesting to me. I think just because like when you go to like the other bigger decks, like in Sapphire Steel, you go to the 5 cost. There was 2 Beast of Wolfsbane, 2 of the Simba, I believe, Rightful Heir, and 2 Mufasa. I don't know his little keyword, but that's 6 5 costs with 2 lore, or 4 5 costs with 2 lore, and then 2 with 3. And like when you go to this deck, you have 1 Facilier, 1 Moana, and 1 Mickey. It doesn't like I understand like you're gonna play that, but once it's gone, it's gone. Like that's the issue with this deck. I think is once those cards are gone, it's gone. And I do believe, like Brandon said, this is the deck to give to someone if they're learning. But and like obviously like it's the go wide mentality with this deck, which for those who are listening, like who don't know, that means just like get a lot of characters down and try to flood your board and overwhelm your opponent. And I think it does it really well. It has a lot of 1 costs, had a lot of 2 costs, and they all do like they do have nice abilities. Like you have that Pascal in there that gains evasive if there's another character on the board. You have Yzma, who, if anyone is familiar with Magic, is the Scry ability, which she quests. And then you get Maleficent down. You can draw with Maleficent, and then you can also use Maleficent to sing Frenzy on the other side, which is also because then you can play another card down. And obviously you can go on and on. I can go on about all these decks, but it does have the Brandon's used to hearing me ramble so much about these cards. But you can go on and on about it. But like I think this deck is very simple. I think is the best way to put it. It's the most simple deck. It is the best deck for beginners, but also I think you still have to you have to be very analytical in when you are playing your bigger pieces. Because if you can play you have the Mickey Mouse Broom package, you have to think about, can I play this down to get the full effect of it? Moana, do I have enough princesses on the board? Facilier, do I have cards in my hand that I can use to get recursion and stuff like that, or whatever his ability is? That's just how I know it. But I think that's like the biggest thing you have to think about is you have to time those bigger cards correctly, and I think that's what makes it, at least in my opinion, the second best out of the 3.
No, that's fair. I really love the Moana, and I think that, well, that and the brooms are just like such a staple of this deck, and I just really connected with them when I got it. And then I think this was like, because we got all 3 when we were at Gen Con, and I like when we were opening up the cards and stuff, I was just like, this seems more fit to my play style, and I think I've kind of stuck with that since. But I think that's what's really great about these 3 is that they are 3 very different play styles.
Yes.
So there is usually something for everyone, which like Ravensburger, when they're putting this together, did a really nice job of like figuring out what cards should go with what. So those are the 3 starter decks. Pretty well. I mean, obviously there's a product shortage, but hopefully your game shop somewhere has been able to stock them. They've been available on Best Buy and Target and stuff. So they have been available, just like a booster box or anything. And also when you get a starter
sooner than we expected originally. So that's
Yeah.
a good sign
Yeah,
for being
so-
able to find this as well.
Yeah, if you haven't gotten your hands on one, you should be able to hopefully soon. But what's really cool with these starter decks is that they come with a booster pack in each of the boxes. So say you collect all 3 starter decks, you now have 3 booster packs that you can now open and start adding those cards and modifying your deck. which is, I think, where I want to kind of start the conversation on deck building. So we've, explained like the inks and kind of how these decks are working. But let's say that you have a starter deck and you're like, okay, I've played the heck out of it. I'm bored of it. I have these, booster packs. Say I got a box, say I got, 6 packs, whatever. I have a small pool of cards. Where do I go to start modifying these decks to start making like a modified custom deck, right? Like you're not building like one from scratch completely. You're just starting to edit a little bit. Where do you start? What do you look at cutting? What do you look at adding? How do you go about those decisions? Teddy, I'll start with you.
I think one of the biggest things is you have to look at the one ofs in each deck. Go like Cruella and LeFou are the lower, at least the lower cost. Like those all have just one of them in the deck. And there are cards like the Evasive Peter Pan, or you can, if you want to go beyond the cards, like for Ruby Emerald, you have the Tinkerbell that gives evasive, the 4-cost Tinkerbell that gives evasive and has evasive. You can go to that. And I think one of the biggest things for all of these is just looking at those cards that only have one of in the deck and just being able to say, is this worth it? Can I add more of this and remove another one? Or are there other better cards that are in the set that can help make these decks better? I think is like the very first step in where, at least if I was remodeling these and like making them better, where I would go.
What about you, Brandon?
So I think when it comes to any type of deck building, the most important thing to think about is your win condition and like what the deck is trying to do. So especially if you've played, any of these decks, okay, even just a couple times, you kind of have an idea of like what their game plan is. And so the very first thing I would look for, let's say it's just those 3 packs, is like what cards in these packs that I opened help immediately progress that win condition. And I kind of like what Teddy said, like, if you have a green Tinkerbell that's evasive, you go, okay, I know that fits into the evasive package of Ruby Emerald, I can slot that in. Also, there's no 4 of cards in any of the decks, so there are going to be cards that are just good cards, like the Maleficent Sorceress. So it's like if you pull a 4th Maleficent Sorceress, take something out and put her in, because she's a very good card in the Amber Amethyst deck. So that's where I would start. After that, I would probably the decks. One of the fun things about Disney Lorcana is your deck doesn't have to do just one thing. In a lot of card games, there's a lot of filler cards in the deck, whether it's energies or lands or whatever it is, and so you're a little bit more limited on the number of cards you can put in your deck. But we see in all 3 starter decks, we even talked about it, how like each deck has probably at least 2 win conditions, right? Like the Amber Amethyst can go wide, or they can do like the Mickey Broom Facilier bounce thing, or even the Moana Princess stuff. The Sapphire Steel is ramp, or you can just do like efficient lore questers, and then Ruby Emerald does control or evasive stuff. And so like whatever you get out of your cards that fits one of those, you can try to push the deck in that direction. Also, there are going to be cards that you pull that are just better cards than other cards in your deck. Just like flat out. Like maybe it doesn't like directly influence the win condition, but if I pull a legendary blue Hades, it's going in my Sapphire Steel deck regardless of what the win condition is. It's just a better card.
Yeah.
So kind of to reiterate what Teddy said, there's also going to be a bunch of cards in your deck that you recognize, I'm inking this all the time and I'm never using it. Or like every time I draw this card, I just kind of sigh and like roll my eyes. It's like, take those cards out, put something in that's more efficient that you can actually use, and then just kind of go from there.
Ben, do you have anything to add? I know this isn't our forte.
Yeah.
But
I have a tiny bit of experience with this just from playing around with what I managed to get at Gen Con. The biggest thing for me when I was tweaking decks was card draw is just king for me at least. Trying to find any way to get card advantage either by me drawing more cards or making my opponent like 2 for 1 or just flat discard cards. I think we have a opponent discards you draw in Emerald, It's not in any of the starters, but I think that's... Or is that it? Does that come out in the next set? Or is it...
Say it again. What?
It's an Emerald action. Chosen opponent discards a card, you draw a card.
It might be. Is it the new? Is it the one with Ka, Brendan?
I'm thinking of the new Hypnotize card.
That's what I was thinking. Like,
That's, yeah, okay, that's not out yet. Whoops.
I mean, you have something like that with
That's
Ursula.
okay.
Ursula basically does. Well, no, she's
Yeah.
not discard. She's Lose the Lord. Never mind. Similar.
Yeah, I was
It
gonna say,
does
it's
a
Lose the
discard
Lord,
too
draw a card.
in the original set.
Yeah.
Which it does the same kind of thing. Making your opponent discard 2 cards is asterisk just as good as you drawing 2 cards. And that asterisk
Yeah.
is if they don't have the cards to discard, that's dead. If you're both top
Yes.
decking, you'd much
Right.
rather be drawing the cards yourself. But taking whatever you can get where you can. Steel has a decent amount of draw, as well as the Amethyst. I'm never going to pronounce it right. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You can find it a little bit here and there in the other colors, and when you can, I would recommend putting that in. Like Amber has the Rapunzel of remove damage and draw. There's
If you can pull it. That's the one
If
card
you
I'm
can pull
missing
it,
in my
yeah.
set. So it's like it's my golden goose that I'm just chasing forever.
She's hard to find.
yeah,
Mhm.
understandably. And then Stitch Rockstar as well turns all of those small cards in the starter deck for Amber Amethyst into they come in exerted, but you've now drawn a replacement for them as well. So you can just kind of
Right, yeah.
throw a thing down, pick it up, throw down the new thing, go, and just machine gun out all this giant army out of nowhere.
Which is a current meta deck that we'll talk about later.
Yep.
So let's say that you've collected your starter decks, you've collected a couple of booster packs, maybe you even gotten like a box at this point. So you have built up like a decent card collection. I think kind of the next step in the deck building journey is net decking, which is where my deck building journey also stops, because I'm like, what did these people do? I'm gonna follow what they did, and then I'll modify it from there. But I do want to shout out Dreamborn.inc, which is the one that I use. There's a bunch of other websites too that you can use, but this one I think has a really, really great collection. If you click on the tab that says decks, you can sort by popular or newest, and it's just people posting decks that they think are really good or decks that have won. There's been a decent amount of tournaments at this point, so we have a lot of tournament final decks that have been on here. And I like just being able to like scroll through and see everyone's different ideas. And then also the reason that I use this site is because you can log your collection and it tells you how much you have of it, which I think is really neat. Yeah, so what do you guys like deck building? Do you think that is cheap? I know there are some people that are like, ooh, you deck build, you cheat. And I'm just like, screw you, because this is the only way that I know how to do this. From the 8 years that I've been playing TCGs, this has been my final step. But yeah, what's your guys' opinions of this?
I'm gonna step out here. Sorry, I have to say this because I'm actually a little bit passionate about it. I cannot stand when people get mad at people who net deck, because the way I see it is I'm like, I mean, imagine like you want to play chess and somebody's like, oh, you can't study openings. Like that's cheating. These people that have spent a bunch of time figuring out like how, the best ways to begin the game. Like, no, you can't do that. You have to learn it yourself. Like, are you kidding me? Come on. Like, there's people that are much better than me that are spending much more time practicing these decks and refining them than I can. It's like, of course I'm going to net deck. Like, why wouldn't you do that? I think it's beneficial to the community. Like, there's definitely pros and cons, because it's beneficial to the community in the sense that everybody's usually playing better, more refined decks, which means like the games should be less one-sided and the games should be more entertaining, and we should get like a higher level and quality of play. The only hindrance is that, like Ruby Amethyst wins a tournament and now half of your league maybe is playing Ruby Amethyst, which does suck. Like, that part is really bad. But it also really encourages people to say, okay, I really hate this deck. I'm going to like try to figure out how to counter this deck. But it's usually where I fall. Like, I don't like playing the top number one deck. I like playing whatever deck beats the top number one deck.
Yes.
So so yeah, I think net decking is totally fine. I actually encourage, like, especially people who just aren't comfortable with deck building, and like especially new players that are getting into a card game, which you see a lot of with Disney Lorcana. Like, they're not going to know how to deck build at all. They're not going to know any of the fundamentals to deck build. They're not even going to know what cards are good. Like, there are certain fundamentals that some of us that have played cards for a long time just understand. Like, draw is good, card advantage is good, but like they're not going to know that. And it's gonna, and like that is a very, very big learning curve, especially if you don't learn from other people. Like, the best way for somebody to learn how to deck build is to watch somebody else who knows how to deck build, right? And so, like, go find decks, ask, like, okay, why are they running these cards? I thought this card was really good. Why don't they run that? You know, and like play out those games. I love Dreamborn too. That's what I usually use to do my deck building, because, like you said, it can tell me how much of my collection I already have. It gives me prices, like how expensive the deck is and how much it would cost for me to build the deck with my collection. And I think also now there's a way to search either people's decks or like search users and then like look at their deck lists, which can also be really helpful, because if you watch a YouTuber or like there's a competitive person that does really well in tournaments, like I think there's a way you can go to their profile and look at a bunch of the different decks that they've built, and not all of them are going to be good. A lot of us brew just random stuff, but like at the very least you can study some of their decks if you want to, or you don't have to do any of that, and you can say, I just want to play a deck that I might can win with, and take the deck from somebody and play it. Like, that's totally fine too.
Yeah, I went looking when you said that. The example that I pulled up was from a top 8, and if you go click on the profile of the person who uploaded them, you can see all of the decks that were in this top 8 from this Miami 1K. It's just clicking their name in the top left corner here, and it'll take you over to their profile. It's an absolutely wonderful tool for being able to do that, because I come from a Magic the Gathering background, so seeing top 8 deck lists is something that I'm just used to. Like, mtgtop8.com is a website for just top 8 deck lists. So
we'll get there one day with Lorcana. Yes. We're not there yet. Teddy, what's your thoughts on all of this?
I agree with Brandon. If you net deck, I will defend you for the rest of my life. Net decking is being something that being 19. I've not been in the TCG space for a while. It's a joke, Brandon, and everyone else likes to make. I'm the youngin' of the group. But it's just being able to, like, obviously, like, I came up from a Pokemon background. That's what I played all throughout middle school and high school. And like, you have like different sites that allow you to see these decks and like see why they're good, and like people will make YouTube videos like about them. And like, obviously, we have a bunch of Lorcana creators who make YouTube videos like why their deck did well and how they play it. And like, why wouldn't you go watch that? Like when if you're looking up like a video game, like you want to find like the secret passages in a video game, you're not going to just go find them yourself. You're going to look it up. Like, I think we've all done that. Unless you are like have a purpose in like going to find them yourself, or like you are creating the YouTube video, then you'll find them yourself. But like, use that, and like obviously like that's a building block. And then you can say like, okay, I'll go play this, and then say you like it, and like you can also make changes to it. Like, that's the great thing about TCGs, is that even if you net deck, you can still go and change the deck. Like, you can take cards out, you can put cards in, you can revamp the entire deck. But I think what net decking does, it just gives someone a jumping off point. And like Brandon said, there are so many new players playing Lorcana, so many families playing Lorcana, and I think is the biggest thing. And like, being able to have like a dad go and like say like, okay, these decks are doing good, this is what I want to buy for my kid. Like, because unless like you're a really smart 8 or 9-year-old playing a TCG, how many of them are going to go and build like Ruby Amethyst to the exact perfection? I think. Yeah. Like, and so like being able to have like parents like for their kids be able to see these decks and say, okay, this is good. Like, maybe they know like their kid likes just to be able to play cards and draw. Like, their kid understands that, they give them the Amber Amethyst deck that's been out there. Like that's a pretty simple. You play cards, you quest, you draw. It's pretty easy, and I think that's the great thing about net decking is it gives, like I said, a jumping off point. It's very easy to do. There's already a ton of sites that have the ability that have those decks. There's YouTube, there's Twitter. I know Lorcana Twitter, you see deck lists going up every single day on there. There's so many spots, and I think it's just it's I don't understand why people are so against it, because it's just a great tool for everyone to be able to use. And like I said, I'll defend anyone who wants to do it for the rest of my life. Like it's a great tool to have and a great resource.
Well, and I think it's really interesting to be able to kind of track how the meta is changing over time. Obviously,
Yeah.
when the game came out, none of us knew what was good. None of us knew what was bad. Everyone was just throwing it at the wall and seeing, what won. And then over time, you start to see, the amber or the ruby amethyst come out, and the amber steel. And now, obviously, those are kind of the top decks that we're seeing. But even today, you can go and look and find a deck that's going to break those. And I think this is a really fun way just for us to track the game, and I'm excited to see, next set where it goes. And, then we might not be playing Amber Steel anymore. We'll be like, oh, Emerald's really good. We need to be playing this all the time. So I think that's kind of the interesting other side of it. That's also a really good point about the kids that I haven't really thought about, because I've seen kids come out and play, and it's like, you're right. They're not building these decks. A parent is definitely helping them. And I mean, like, also the little kid that I played against yesterday went 3-0. So I mean,
Hey.
go kids,
There
right?
you go.
Yeah, my boyfriend lost to him. A 31-year-old lost to a 9-year-old, and I'm gonna put that out on the internet for everyone to hear.
Remember, folks, that
It's
is the
fine.
other
He-
Ben.
he
That
al-
is not me. That is.
Yes. There's two Vens. Okay, so then I think obviously the next step past neck decking is kind of creating your own deck, which is something that I really don't have a ton of experience with. I like to find an idea online and then modify it myself from there. I'm a creative person, but I have zero creativity when it comes to how do I build a deck? Where do I start? And these are the questions that I need you guys to answer for me. Like, do I pick a character and start with that? Do I pick a color? Do I pick a win condition, like you were saying, Brandon? Say you're starting at 0 and you've got, all 206 cards in front of you. Where do you do? How do you start?
Don't worry about the
How
60
do-
limit. I think what you do is, this is just how I go about deck building, is say I have a color, I'm going and I'm just putting 4 of every card that I want into the deck. That's how I do it. And then I'll go back and obviously refine it. And one of the things is the reason I always Pokemon is a 60 card deck, and that's set at 60. You have to have 60. I believe Magic is also 60.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong.
60. You can play as many as you want. As long as you can.
I know,
shuffle them.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, interesting Lorcana strategy. I might have to try.
I think that's in their tournament documents now, where it's you can play as many as you want as long as it does not create a logistical problem.
There you go. But I believe some games are 50. I believe Digimon is 50. And I'm branching off in other games, but 60 is kind of the industry standard, quote unquote, in decks and how you build your decks, and it's seemingly found to be the most consistent way. And obviously, if you're going to have 80 cards in a deck, which may sound cool, you have more options, you're going to see less of the cards, though. It's less consistent. You're not going to be able to get to
especially with the limited card draw that we have right now.
Yeah.
You're going to
exactly.
see maybe 40 of those. It's not worth having all of those options, as cool, like you said, as it sounds.
Yeah. So when you're starting to build the deck, don't worry about the 60, but try to get it to as close as 60. And the other topic I'll bring up is curve. Curve is probably one of the biggest things in Lorcana deck building specifically, and any other game that has a cost to play a card. Like Pokemon, the curve's not. You don't really because you have so much deck search, and that's a whole different conversation. Brandon and I both come from a Pokemon background, so deck search is something that's really popular there. But for Lorcana, you have your curve, and you want to be able to stay on that curve. And so like you want to have like an ample amount of 1 cost, 2 cost, 3 cost, 4 cost. And once you start getting like 5 and up, you may have less of those because you are at a stage where you can play like multiple lower cost cards. But obviously you want your higher cost cards because they're going to be more powerful. But one of the things is keeping on that curve, having an ample enough of all of those low cost cards, you could be able to play a card. And like if you put an ink down, if you start the game like, hey, I'm gonna go first, you draw your hand, you mulligan, you take a card, you ink it, you say pass, that never feels good. Or like if you have to say like you have to draw and pass and like not be able to do anything, that never feels good because like if you don't have a card to play. And so I think just being able to stay on curve is something that's great, and also just watch your ink ability count, because if you like flood your deck with uninkable cards, it's going to be a lot harder to play cards because you're like I've Ruby Amethyst, I'll bring up, like that deck is very good, and like obviously it's shown to be very good, but there are some weird spots where you can get into where you have no inkable cards in your hand, and that's lost me games before. It's just stop me from doing anything. I'm sitting there like I have 3B prepareds, 2 Dragonfires, like I have all this in my hand, but I can't do anything because I don't have an inkable card. Yeah, I can't play it. And so like I think like watching like your ink ability count, I feel like around 12 to 16 is like the sweet spot, at least I found with deck building, and then just keeping on curve is
right.
Yeah, for uninkable cards, and like keeping on the curve as well to be able to play a card each turn. And it always doesn't have to be a character. It can be like you look at Steel Sapphire, you might want to play Develop Your Brain turn 1 because you want to look through your deck. Then you're going to play Ramp turn 2. But then turn 3, you're going to play Detective Mickey, and then your characters come down. So you don't always have to play characters on curve, but you also want to just be able to you want to stay on that curve, so you're playing a card every turn and also be able to ink a card every turn, so you can keep building up to get to those stronger cards later in the game.
What do you think? This is just a random question that I have. When do you stop inking? Like when in your inkwell, like when do you consider that you have too many cards? Because I've gotten a 10 before, but I was also like heavily winning, so I was just like, I don't care if I'm inking because I've got Ursula out and I could play, another 9 cost card next, But like, when do you think is kind of a sweet spot? Are you at 6? Are you at 8?
I don't think they're ever. I'll actually let Brandon answer this question.
I think this is not a question that can be like broadly answered, because I hate giving this answer, but like it depends on the deck kind of a thing. I'll give 2 examples. In the Steel Sapphire starter deck, you have 1 8 cost card and 1 7 cost card, and then everything else is either 6 or below. And so most of the time with that deck, you can get away with only inking 6 cards, because statistically, you drawing your 7 cost card or your 8 cost card and not being able to play it is really low. If you have the luxury of being able to get to 7 or 8, or if the card's in your hand and you can play it, then it's advisable to do that. But otherwise, there's not much of a reason to like continue to inking, especially in a starter deck format. But then if we take a deck like Ruby Amethyst, I've seen people get up to like 20 plus ink in their inkwell, mainly because because there's like they're playing really expensive cards and there's big combos they want to play. So they want to play like Elsa for 8 and then play Aladdin and then play Pocket Watch and then use Pocket Watch to use Aladdin to swing into something that Elsa exerted. And so like you're spending a lot of ink in that in those matchups. And so it can greatly vary. What I would say, because it kind of depends on the deck too, like if you're playing an aggro deck, I've also seen some aggro decks like a Amber Emerald deck not ink more than 3 or 4 cards and then just like throw every card on the table that they can because they can get away with it. So you'll probably hear me continue to come back to this like pay attention to your win condition kind of thing, because like that's kind of what it depends on. Like if you need to be playing expensive cards, or if you being able to spend 15 ink in one turn to play this huge thing like actually helps you win the game, try to get to that. But you have to be conscious of during your match if you even have the luxury to ink all of those cards, because sometimes you're top decking, and like it'd be great if you could have extra ink in your inkwell, but like you can't afford to do it because you need to just be playing whatever you're top decking. So it kind of depends on the situation and the deck. Generally, I would say, in a very generalized sense, you don't need more ink than the highest cost card in your deck, because then whatever you top deck or whatever you draw, you can play. But even that has like a lot of asterisks beside it. But in a very, very general sense, that's what I would recommend to people is like, you know, if you know your most expensive card is 8, don't put any more than 8 ink in your inkwell, and just kind of run with that.
Yeah. Teddy mentioned like you just put all the cards in your deck that you want, and then play some games and narrow it down from there. That's also something you'll figure out as you start playing with a deck as well, is not just which cards do I want, but how much ink do I need in a turn. Like for that Ruby Amethyst deck where you're recurring a bunch of things and taking a bunch of expensive actions all in the same turn, you'll find out, oh, my maximum amount of ink consumption per turn is actually in the 20s. Whereas in a much more low to the ground deck, you might not want to be playing more than 6 or 7 inks a game, because at that point you're, like you were saying, throwing cards out and rather than playing them. And then you've got,
and then there's cards like Bell, where
I was just about
it's because we're on the same wavelength, where like you are rewarded for having over 10 cards or 10 plus cards, you know, in your inkwell, and you're like, I got a ramp, I need that Mickey, I need all of the Mickeys to start, you know, kind of getting it going.
And that goes back to Brandon's remember your win con, because if your win condition is Bell, Strange but Special, you gotta get to 10. It's just a thing you have to do.
So Brandon, for deck building advice, would you say that you start with a win condition in mind and build around that, or?
I'm going to say no, mainly because earlier I think you had it, like you were asking, you know, do I start with an ink color? Do I start with a favorite character or like an idea? And like the answer to that is yes to all of those. When it comes to deck building, it's like whatever idea you have, just run with it. Like if you want to build an entire deck that only runs Mickey Mouse, I don't think that's possible right now, but like I'm sure it eventually will be. Like start with that
one day.
And just like and like just start with that, and then as soon as you do that, like look at a win condition and say, okay, like out of these pool of cards or out of this combo or like whatever kind of deck you want to build, it can be something as broad as I just want to build a Amber Emerald deck, or it could be I specifically want to play a Moana deck. Or it can even be it can be broader than that. It can be like, I like playing aggressive decks, so I want to build an aggro deck. And like, you don't even have an ink, you don't even know what 2 inks you want to play yet. But once you have that idea, that really helps you shape your win condition, because whatever it is you're trying to build your deck around is probably your win condition. And then I have a term that I like to call a solid 15. Like Teddy was saying, you have to minimum have 60 cards in your deck, and you can run 4 copies of a card in your deck. So you can run 15 cards, 4 copies of those cards in your deck, and you hit 60. And that is the most consistent a deck will ever be. That will rarely ever be like the refined version of that deck. Usually you end up taking stuff out and adding a couple 2-ofs and 3-ofs. But at least to begin with, and starting to play a deck and figure out like, one, does this deck even work? And then like figuring out where it needs improvement. I try really, really hard to find cards that immediately improve my win condition. So like a great example I like to give is Stitch Rockstar. If you want to build a deck around Stitch Rockstar, you find cheap 1 and 2 cost cards that can quest for a lot of lore, and you put those in your deck. And like those immediately help. Those immediately affect your win condition. Whereas something like the Amber Mickey Mouse is a 2 lore, 3 cost character, like sort of helps you with your win condition because it's a heavy lore quester, but like doesn't directly help the win condition. So once you kind of get those core cards, and then you can start considering other cards like that. But for the most part, I try really hard to figure out what your win condition is, find the cards in whatever ink pairing you're trying to do that directly influence that win condition and push that win condition further. and then put 4 of each of those cards into your deck. And then again, like Teddy said, something else that's really big, keep in mind of your ink curve. Usually some decks can get away with not having early drops, and some decks can get away with not having late drops. But for the most part, you want something you can play every turn, and you want to be able to ink every turn. So I don't recommend people go over 12 uninkables if they want to be consistent. But obviously, there are plenty of people out there who run more than that and are able to make it work. But once you start getting over 12, you start running into positions where you have to make really hard decisions on, you're forced to ink something you don't want to ink, or it gets a lot harder to figure out how to play the deck at that point. And at least in the beginning, I think it's more important for your deck to be consistent and for you to just be able to like ink something, play something, see if you can get your win condition to work. And then you'll start to figure out, okay, I really need this other uninkable card because, in the past 5 games, if I drew that card, it would have helped me win the game or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And then that kind of helps you flesh out your collection too, and kind of figure out like what cards am I missing, what cards do I want, and then obviously on Dreamborn it also can give you like a price cost for that. I've looked at so many decks where I'm like, oh, that Rapunzel would be so nice, but I don't have the money for that, so we're just not going to build a deck around that. No princesses for now. It's fine. One day. So I think all of those are really interesting points, and now I want to talk. You guys are both really big into like the community and like seeing the decks and seeing the games being run and commentating and stuff. What are the current meta decks right now? We've kind of talked about them already, but I'll let you guys actually like fully explain what they are, what they do, what we're seeing in the community right now.
I can talk about Ruby Amethyst. I think that's probably the most prevalent, the most used deck. And like as of recently, we're seeing a lot of other decks top tournaments, which is really nice to see. We're not seeing Ruby Amethyst run the table, but for a while it was Ruby Amethyst. And that deck's idea is you want to get up to your big cost. You have the 8 cost Elsa, which lets you play her down. You get to exert 2 chosen characters, and they can't ready up. It leaves them defenseless for challenges, and they also can't quest. You basically get a free turn. Then you also have the 7 or 8 cost Mickey. It's 8. Believe the brave little Taylor.
The evasive Mickey.
Evasive
I think he's 8.
He's 8. Okay. Yeah.
Because you have 8 and you have evasive, which obviously evasive is amazing, but also he has 4 lore, which when you think about it is 20% of your win condition to get there. So like you have that option. You have the 9 cost Maleficent, which has the ability Dragonfire to play that out. You have the 8 cost Ursula, which your opponent loses a lore, you draw a card. You have Be Prepared. There are so many different powerful cards in that deck that once you get up there, and if you can like just keep playing those down and like play them in the right turns and be able to like have that there, and obviously you also have draw. You start your game off with Maleficent and friends on the other side. You have the mirror in there. You have and then you also like the way I built it is like recently I did a top 8 in Lorcana HQ online tournament with it. You use the Pongo, the Goofy, the Tigger. You have those evasives earlier in the game to be able to like people can't deal with them unless they have heart removal. You also have, like I said, Be Prepared. You also have Dragonfire. So like obviously the deck is very good. You have a lot of different routes to win, and honestly that's why it was so good for a long time. And I still think with set 2 it's going to still be good. I don't think and like obviously we're going to get more draw. Dinner Bell is a card that's coming in Rise of the Floodborn, and that's draw for Ruby, which is new. It gives that the ability to draw. So like I think Ruby Amethyst is it's a control-y type of deck. It's what it wants to do. It's one of those decks that goes against what I said earlier. You're not gonna like maybe have a card you play every single turn. You should be able to ink every single turn, but you might not play a card every single turn because you have so many of these high cost cards. You're gonna be playing from behind, which is counterintuitive, you may think. But if you can get a Be Prepared, and something that Ben mentioned was card advantage. If you play 1 Be Prepared and you wipe out 4 of your opponent's cards, that's a 1 for 4. And that is just the tide shifts. It changes the game. And I think that's the great thing about the deck is it has that ability to do that. And once you're up to that 7+, and if you can play it right, you're running away with the game. I have lost games where I've got up there and I still haven't been able to pull it out. And maybe user error, who knows? But just being able to, I think that deck is so good, and it'll still stay good. And like, there are so many different routes to be able to win. So many big, powerful cards that can help that deck get to the 20 lore needed to win.
I love like playing the Be Prepared and then having the card draw in that deck, because you're almost guaranteed to be able to play something next turn where your opponent might not necessarily have cards in their top decking. So you might be holding back, the Elsa, the Ursula, or whatever, and you're like, or the Aladdin even, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna play my big guy now. You've got like a little bodyguard Simba. Now we see the tide turning. So I don't know. There's something about that feeling that I just chase. I love that deck for that reason. Brandon, do you want to talk about the other really big one right now?
Yeah, so Ruby Amethyst, obviously, I think is the most popular, like Teddy had said. Behind that, I would say, is Amber Steel. And it got really popular because it beat Ruby Amethyst. I believe it was in Denver at like a 1K or 2K. And there's actually a couple different versions of this deck. There's an aggro version of the deck that likes to run Stitch Rockstar. And the idea behind the deck is people realized I'm not going to out-control Ruby Amethyst. And by that's like I can't mid-range Ruby Amethyst because it's just not fast enough. So I just have to either have to be faster than Ruby Amethyst is and in the game before turn 7, or I have to be able to just constantly like overflow my board and force them to deal with it. And so that's what the aggro version of the deck is pretty good at doing. You play Stitch Rockstar, you play a bunch of 1 and 2 cost cards. You play some steel cards, which are good to help keep you ahead by playing removal. And specifically, people like to play A Whole New World. And that's a really great card because you can sing it, which means you don't have to spend... Well, for those who don't know, the card makes both players discard their hand and then draw 7 cards. Which at first might sound like, well, that's not great. Why would I want my opponent to draw 7 cards? Well, it's great because you can usually sing it, which means you're not paying any ink to play this card. You're refreshing your hand, and then you can use all the ink that you haven't spent yet and continue to play stuff onto the board. And then the reason it's also good is because your Ruby Amethyst player, like Teddy was saying, isn't playing a bunch of cards usually, especially in the early and mid game. And so a lot of times they're either holding cards like Be Prepared, waiting to play them at a good time, or they're sitting on some Elsas or Maleficent Monstrous Dragons. And by playing cards like A Whole New World, there's also the Amber card, You Have Forgotten Me, which forces your opponent to discard 2 cards. You can put your opponent in positions where they're forced to discard cards that they were going to use against you to help get that advantage while they were behind. So the aggro version is really good at doing that. There's also a mid-range version that some people like to run some Stitch Rockstars, but it's a little bit more focused around Rapunzel and the Stitch Carefree Surfer and a little bit more expensive Amber Steel things, and really has the same game plan of just playing stuff and then drawing a bunch of cards so that when you know that the Be Prepared is coming down or your opponent tries to clear your board, you just have more stuff that you can keep playing down because your hand is really full.
Tinkerbell Giant Fairy and like all of them. It's like, yeah, that's like a really big one that you'll see in it. I went to a store last night and all 3 of my matchups were Amber Steel, and I was just like, okay. Like one of them was mid-range, but I was just like, I'm bored. Like, because like for those that don't know, when you go to stores, it's normally 50 minutes, best of 3 rounds. So you're playing at max 9 games, and if you go to all 3, but at the minimum you're playing 6, and you're just like, I am tired of Stitch, I'm tired of Tank, can I get something new? Like, I've seen this before, I've read the story, I've heard the song, like let's go. I guess it makes the games quick though, and you know what to look for at that point. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Sorry, I'm glad you brought that up because Giant Tinkerbell is another great card in the deck, and part of the reason that it's good is because, like I mentioned, everybody's trying to beat Ruby Amethyst, And one of the things I mentioned was going faster than Ruby Amethyst was, which is just aggro decks that are cheap and low to the ground. And Big Tink is like a phenomenal card in the Amber Steel deck, because you're both fighting against Ruby Amethyst, and if you go up against all the other people that are trying to race Ruby Amethyst, you can shut them down pretty quickly with a giant Tinkerbell and do a grab your sword or something. So yeah.
Oh, that's it right there. That's the combo. It's the grab your sword and the Tinkerbell, and you just say goodbye board. This is why I run Be Prepared in my decks, because I'm just like or Dragonfire, and I'm just like goodbye. I'm done with you. Have fun.
Yeah.
I can't deal with it.
My first tournament at my local store that wasn't like a pre-constructed deck tournament, I brought in an upgraded version of Amber Amethyst, and just round one got paired in the mirror match, except I had a slightly better version of the deck and got it. But then rounds 2 and 3 was just nonstop Tink grabbing your swords, and I can't do anything if I'm gonna just get completely torn to pieces here. It's a phenomenal combo at stopping aggro, but like you said, it's a great answer for the decks that are trying to answer the big control decks that are taking over right now.
What I think is really interesting, so we were at Gen Con, so obviously we've been playing the game since August. I think it's nice to see that it took the meta kind of this long to kind of figure itself out for a new game. It wasn't like week 2 we were like, these are the best decks. Like, it at least took some time to get there, and like people got to play around with all the color combinations, so I do appreciate that a little bit. And maybe it was because people were having a hard time getting supply. I don't know what the answer to that one is, but it is nice that we are just finally getting here when next month we're getting the new set. So it's gonna change. We don't have that much longer of this being the top meta. And that's what we like to call a segue, because I want to ask what you guys want to see in the future from the new set of cards. We've gotten some spoilers already, obviously. But what mechanic, and we have resist coming. We're going to hope for more card draw. We know that Dinner Bell is going to have it. But what specifically do you guys want to see to help enhance what we already have in set 1?
I'm gonna say this now. Resist is busted. It's broken. Yes. I think the podcast. I believe it was a podcast we just recorded that Brandon was recently on. We talked about it, and it's if there's not an answer in Rise of the Floodborn, it's going to be a ability that is going to run rampant. And if you go like to decks that want it, if I believe Steel Sapphire, as much as
really.
I believe it's going to be, because I think obviously you have the Cinderella that has it. I believe the Tiana has it as well. The smaller Cinderella has it as well. And you have the ability to obviously use that resistant. You also have like the newer cards with like the Grandfather Clock. It gives everyone resist 1, which is going to be crazy. It's so like if you throw, let's say you throw the Grandfather Clock is down, you also get the Aurora, which gives out ward. It's stopping people from removing your cards with Dragonfire, and obviously you can use like Be Prepared, like Dragonfire. Any of like Smash or Fry the Cannons won't be able to work into that deck. So if those are both out, when you are challenged into all of your characters are taking 1 less, so it makes it that much harder for people to remove your characters, and you can't be targeted by anything. We've seen how strong ward can be in certain scenarios, and so like I believe that Steel Sapphire, and it's something that I want to play with, is going to be really good. And I also believe Ruby Sapphire is going to be good as well, with like the ward combos, and like you can do Shield of Virtue to ready up ward characters and stuff. There's a lot of combos there, but I think
that card is so good.
Shield of Virtue it wasn't sought to be, or wasn't seen to be a very good card at the start, but as like decks have been built, I've run into like there's the Donald that's at ward, and I've literally lost the game because he's quested with the Donald, used the Shield of Virtue, and like I was playing Ruby Amethyst, and I had Befuddle, and I had Dragonfire, but like I never drew them at the same time, which was unfortunate. And so like being able to like, and obviously ramp, and you have Dinner Bell, so there's draw on that deck now. So I believe Sapphire, and then like with Steel and with Ruby is going to become very good once Rise of the Floodborn comes out. And we only have like a very small percent of the cards from the set, so we're gonna see even more.
Oh,
that
yeah.
hopefully makes it better.
I would like to see Sapphire and Emerald get better just to make them all as competitive. Because right now it feels
Mhm.
like they're more seen as splash colors and not your main color. So it would be nice for them to get just a little bit to kind of bump them up a little bit
Yeah,
more. Also because
for sure.
I do like Sapphire as a set. I didn't like the combination of Sapphire Steel. Brandon, what are your opinions? What do you want to see?
So I have two things. I'll do the first one because it's quick and we haven't seen it yet. I'd love to see an ability or cards that allow me to use my lore as a resource. Kind of similar in the way that, like in other games, you have this where you use your life as a resource, like your life points or whatever. And so this would kind of be this game's version of that. And I think it would be really fun, and like it would take a lot of skill and you could do a lot of fun stuff with it. And then the next thing that I'd like to see, which we see a little bit with, I forget what it's called. Is it Sorcerer's Spellbook? Is that what the name of the card is? I don't remember. But it's the amethyst item card that lets you exert the item card to gain a lore.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
and
yes.
essentially, I want to see more ways for people to gain lore outside of relying on characters. Because what we saw in the first chapter is games were kind of telegraphed towards the last, like, sometimes 5 to like 1 turn on who was going to win. And it was kind of nice knowing that if there wasn't a character on board, there was no way for your opponent to win next turn. But I find the games are way more suspenseful and fun to watch and entertaining when you're like sitting there biting your nails because you are, hoping that your opponent doesn't draw the spell that lets them gain 2 lore or whatever and win the game and take the game from you. So I'd be really excited to see that. So you don't want to go too crazy, but I'm excited to see like Sorcerer's Spellbook now because it's a way that, on any turn you can play 3 ink, play the card, and then tap it for 1 or exert it for 1 and win the game, if you're at 19 lore, and there's nothing your opponent can do about that. And like from a commentating perspective and from a viewer perspective, those create really exciting moments in the game when somebody can win if they just draw this card, and even as players, like you draw the card and then you like get all excited, you play it and win. So for that reason, I'd like to see a little bit more of that too.
Yeah, I would love to see one of those just stuck at 19 lore. The only out is drawing the book off the top, and you just rip it.
Yeah, I think I would like to see obviously more of that, especially because there are ways for us to remove lore, in various different ways with characters. So it'd be nice to have something that does the opposite, it's outside of questing. I think I'd also like to see, and Ben and I have kind of talked about this before, but a way to get back what you've put in your inkwell. And I don't necessarily know how that would work, but just a way for you to manage that as a resource, because obviously now we're putting it down there, it's stuck. But if there was a way for you to pull it back out and be like, maybe I need this card now, or, even if it's just a random card or something, you don't get to know what it is, but just like, or like a way for you to do that to your opponent and be like, oh, you think that you have 5, I'm going to take this back. Now you only have 4. Now you have to ink again, or, do something. It is a resource, so it is something that you think should be managed. I forget why we thought that could be a thing. I think it was something in like the tournament document that we were reading that it read as a way where it was like, this is suspicious and could be coming in the future. But we also have like a tinfoil hat theory of like why we haven't gotten like the full rule book yet, and we're like, it's because there's all these things that are in it and they don't want us to know yet because it's like set 4 stuff. That's been a nice conspiracy theory over here.
I'm convinced
honestly,
that the reason they haven't put the rules out is because their instant speed interaction is in the rules, and they don't know how to take it out.
Yeah.
I think like that. I could agree with that, and just like this, I'll say something small, but like obviously, like, we saw a new keyword already like released in set 2, and like if they wanted to like update the rule book every set, they could, but like if they've said like we have 6 sets already, there could be new stuff that gets in set 6. Like that theory does make sense in the fact that like there probably is more stuff that we don't know that they just can't show us yet, and like that's why they obviously revealed the quick start rules, because it was all set 1 stuff. But, like I believe that like there's a lot more in the full rule guide.
Yeah. What one
There has to
mechanic
be,
that
and, like,
did get leaked out of the tournament docs for sure
Mm-hmm.
Is that there will be a way for you to take an extra turn after the current one. Because they mentioned during the end of round procedures, it's like the current player finishes their turn and then there's 5 additional turns. Normally, this is alternating between the players,
Yeah.
but not always.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
that it's coming. I don't know when, but it's going to happen.
And I think that they also need to add the interactions, like not on your turn, like a reaction, whether it to be, you know, to cancel a song that was just played. Like it's something that's needed, and I'm sure that they know that, and I'm sure it's going to be, you know, if not set 2, set 3 or 4. But that's basically like my biggest gripe of the game right now is just like I'm bored when it's not my turn, and I'm probably a 5-year-old for saying that, and like I should be paying attention to the other player, but like I need something to do, right? Because it's just like I'm watching you do all this stuff and there's nothing that I can do about it. So that's kind of my opinion. But I've also played a lot of card games where there's always an option for me to do something on my turn. So like I'm thinking like in Game of Thrones where I can cancel something that you're doing, but it's okay. It's a new game. I think that there's allowances that have to be made. And obviously it was made to be family friendly. It's not catering to us quite yet. And I think that it will be, you know, around the set 4, the set 6 and stuff.
Yeah.
With that, I want to ask, okay, so there's a couple of questions that we got from the viewers that I want to get through quick if we have time. But first, real easy, everyone pick your favorite deck that you've played so far.
Ruby Amethyst.
Amber Steel.
Brandon?
Sapphire Steel.
Okay, I'm going to say Ruby Emerald because I really like evasives. Like, it doesn't win all the time. It actually doesn't win a lot of the time. But when it does win, it feels freaking good and it's awesome. What type of theme deck do you like the most? Or are you looking forward to building once it gets a few more cards? So I'll start and say princesses because I am like a Disney princess girl. And I want to have like a full Disney princess deck.
I'm going pirates. I want pirates so bad.
Ooh,
I want to see Jack Sparrow. I want like
okay.
Pirates of the Caribbean in this game.
That's awesome.
Sorry for the train in the
That's very
background.
cool.
It sounded
Yeah,
like,
sorry. That's probably me.
But for me, it would probably be. I know, like I want to see a deck that's just full of evasives. That's something I just want. Like
Ooh.
every single card has evasive, and like maybe it'll be possible. And I think, but also one is Frozen, because obviously like we've seen the correlation between Elsa and Anna already, and I think that would be really cool just to be able to like play that, and like any deck that like you can play with one franchise, I think is going to be really cool. Like I'm a huge Cars fan, so if Pixar ever gets introduced to Lorcana, if I can play like Lightning McQueen, the King, Mater, all of those guys in one deck, that's something that I'm already looking forward to.
That would be amazing. Like, I obviously want Pixar to come because, you know, Ben and I obviously work for a Disney theme park site. We want to see these characters come in. But to bring a deck to Cars Land, like, oh man, that would be so cool.
Yeah, no, I've got the idea of making a deck that is like actually good, but contains cards that have all been signed by the park's characters. Like because they'll sign autograph books and stuff. Like get them to sign cards, and then just show up with that. But the one thing that I don't know if this is really a theme or like a lack of a theme, but have any of you heard about the Tigger conspiracy yet?
Oh boy, here we go. This is another tinfoil hat. Put it on. Get ready.
the one Tigger that we've had printed has the character subtype of Tigger.
Because he's the only one. That's how it goes in the song. Tigger is the only one.
I want to see a deck based around or an effect printed where we get the ability to just like get rid of everything that isn't a Tigger, So
Oh,
only
that
the
would be
Tiggers,
fun.
the Tiggers are the only one. But I would love to see more Winnie the Pooh support, which I know is coming in the next set. But
Yeah.
I'd like to see something where like there's a benefit for having all of those characters in play at the same time, kind of like the Anna Elsa or the Flotsam Jetsam, but something more akin to maybe like in Magic the Gathering. There's the party mechanic. If you have like a wizard and a cleric and a barbarian, I forget what they all are. I should know this, but if you have all of these different creature types in play at the same time, spells and effects do more based on the size of your party. It's like, well, I'd love to see something where it's like if you assemble all of the characters from the 100-Acre Wood, the Christopher Robin is especially powerful or something like that.
Well, I'm really hoping that we get that because we know that Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is going to be in Rise of the Floodborn. So I'm really hoping that we get all dwarves as a card, and then
Ooh,
Snow White
yes.
is just like, you pay one less for every dwarf that you have in play, or like she gets beefed, you know, or gets extra lore or something. I think that would be really
Something-
neat.
Other dwarfs have ward. Other dwarfs have.
Oh yeah,
Something
that'd
that
be
I
fun.
saw on
Yeah.
because I believe it's on one of the starter decks. It says the Seven Dwarfs on the back of it. We saw it, but we don't know if it's like the Seven Dwarfs as a whole card, like all seven of them
Right.
are on one card. And so, like, in my opinion, I feel like that's a lost opportunity. I would bet we would see more like those singular cards, but I think maybe like the Seven Dwarfs, and maybe it's like an action, like the Seven Dwarfs do this or something like that. So like, but yeah, like this, like Snow, like you have like a lot of already things already confirmed for the second set. And I think that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
I
I'm
don't-
just
I
excited
don't
to see
know.
new properties.
I don't know how healthy for the game it would be, but it makes me wonder if they'll ever like go Exodia with something like that.
Oh,
It's like if you get all seven dwarves, or if you get every character from 100-Acre Woods, you just win the game. Like alternate win conditions would be
gosh.
fun.
So that kind of reminds me, one of the stores that I go to, they have like side quests when you're playing your game. So it's like if you quest for more than 5 lore in a turn, or if you get all 3 musketeers on the board at the same time together, or it was like if you play like Anna and Elsa together, then they would give you like a special prize at the end of the night, whether it be like a promo or a pin or like a booster pack if they had it. But I thought that was really cool, and it was like maybe like more stores could do something like that. Like you get all of the dwarves and Snow White. Here's like a pack, or here's a pin. You know, I think those are like really fun little things, and also I like just the like keep it in the back of your mind, like, ooh, I have this combo. I should play this together because then I get something cool. And I like that idea. Brandon, you've kind of already answered this, but what character or movie not in the game yet are you most excited to join the game? So you said pirates. I'm here for it. I love pirates. Great movies. Jack is great. Make more now that Johnny Depp's doing good again. Ben, you you want Winnie the Pooh, but what else? Because we know Winnie the Pooh is coming.
Right. I want to see characters from the parks. I want to see Figment show.
Yeah.
I want to see
Oh my gosh.
original concepts that haven't been in the movies show up as various different kinds of things, because there's a whole treasure trove of like they could go real deep on some stuff and get parks fans very excited very quickly.
And since it's already being sold in the parks, I mean, we don't know when restocks are going to be happening again, but like it already has the tie-in there. We know it's being sold in Paris and in California and in Florida. So I mean, there is the base there. And considering that they sold out literally both days that they've been sold, whether it's people like locals driving in or it's families that happen to be there, I mean, they know that they have the player base. So
yeah,
I would like to see that too. I would cry if Figment got put in the game. Like I would bring him to the Figment meet and greet, have him sign it, and just like crying the whole time.
You want to
Teddy,
make a ton of money
cars?
real quick. You go put a Food and Wine Festival exclusive version of a
like
card,
a stamp.
Oh man,
so that you have
Yes.
to go
It's
into
like
the park
there's
to buy it.
there's like the themed food like for different characters for some of that stuff, and like that I think that would be really cool. Like but yeah, I want cars, but like if we take Pixar out of the equation, I think I said this a week before it got revealed, but I am so excited for Zootopia. That
Oh
Judy
yeah.
Hopps, like I love. My specialty is dating people, like sending them back, like making them feel old.
Oh.
Yeah, the words on that.
Like, you're 19. That's impressive. That's.
I'll restart that.
No, that's going in. You
No,
guys
That's
can't
great.
edit that
Yeah,
one
My
out.
specialty is making people feel older though.
There you go.
Because I'm so
Yes.
young, and like I grew up with Zootopia. That was something that like I saw as a child, and like Frozen obviously was
my
something I
God.
saw was a kid. Like, see, I'm doing it. That Brandon knows the feeling. And Brandon's only like
Child, I
5 or
was
6.
College.
Brandon's like only
Yeah.
5 or 6 years older than me. But like
Oh.
like Toy Story wasn't even like the first movie wasn't even out when I was born. I think Toy Story 2 was just coming out.
Oh, you
And
sweet,
so-
sweet child.
So like all this newer stuff like I grew up with, and like it's like something like Raya is something that's coming. Like that's what the younger generation grew up with. And I think that's really cool. And like obviously they're tapping into all of that. But like Zootopia is something I'm really excited about. Seeing Monsters Inc. like Pixar. But like I feel like Pixar obviously grew. Like it was very big as I was growing up. And like being able to see like all of those Cars, Pixar, Toy Story, all of that stuff is something I'm really excited about. But like Zootopia, like I'm so ready for Flash. I'm so ready to see that card.
Oh,
I feel
yeah.
like he's gonna have like a really good control ability that slows down your opponent. And then there's like Flash's car that goes really fast or something like that. So like
Mhm.
I can say everything, but yeah, it's like something like a lot of that stuff like that I grew up watching, and like that was my childhood is something I'm really excited for.
Oh, thanks for making me feel old. Just
It's my
I'll go
specialty.
skip my-
It's my
Great.
I'll
specialty.
get my walker after this. I really want to see Muppets. So for me that was
Ooh.
really big growing up, and I love the Muppets, and there's a lot of tie-ins right now with the parks. Just right now for Food and Wine, they gave them an opportunity to have their own booth in Epcot. So clearly Disney's caring more about that, and we got the Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem show. So they're showing that they want to use this property more, as they should. So I'm hoping that makes its way over to the card game, because I need to have like a Kermit and like a Miss Piggy, and oh god, I love them so much. I think that'd be really cute.
I know it's like obviously like a big topic of conversation, like Marvel and Star Wars. I
Yeah.
personally don't believe it'll ever make it with Marvel Unlimited, right? Unlimited coming
that's
out
right.
next year.
Star Wars Unlimited.
Star Wars Unlimited, right? Yeah. Duh. And Marvel Champions is still going strong with FFG.
Yeah.
So like obviously like those two card games are very big, and I don't think they want to give up the rights to those. And like so like obviously like I would love to be able to swing a Darth Vader into a Mickey. Like that would be awesome. And I think we'll see like custom
Yeah.
cards one day with that stuff. But that's like something that I want. I think everyone wants, but I don't think it'll generally happen unless those licenses are given up. But I think Disney wants to keep this as like a Disney centric game. And like obviously like you have your Marvel rides, you have your Star Wars rides, you have like a whole like land committed to both of them
Mhm.
in Disneyland and in Disney World and across the world generally. But like it's like they have that stuff, but like it doesn't fit, I feel like, the mold of Disney Lorcana.
No, I
Yeah, that's
agree
fair.
with you. And so in Villainous, obviously Ravensburger's
Mhm.
other, Disney games, they do have those properties, but even when they're being sold, they're sold as singles. They're not
Mhm.
sold in the box with like the other Disney characters. So they are still
Yeah.
trying. They're saying, hey, you could use this, but we're still keeping it separate as far as packaging and stuff.
Mhm.
And so I agree with you. I don't think it'll probably come to this game. I'm personally fine with it.
Yeah.
If you want to play those, just go play other games. But
Mhm.
I want to leave my Mickey and my happy little Disney World like all in like a little bubble.
I think it'll happen, but I think it'll be much later. I think like at years out, many years out, if this game is still going as strong as it is today, where there's a supply chain issue that like we're gobbling it up.
I hope not.
That I think Disney might go, hey, this is selling better than yours are. Maybe we can put this to better use here.
Well, they said that they have a 10-year plan, so I guess when we're much older and Teddy is a full-grown adult, we'll see if they're at it.
I won't even
Okay,
be
so
30 in 10
last.
years.
Oof.
Yeah.
That
It's just,
okay,
it's something
just
to
gonna
that's
gonna breeze on by that one. Ben's
love
like,
it.
I'm already 30. I'm like, I'm knocking on the door. Like,
I slowly
we're
dig
mom
myself
and
a
dad
grave
of
with these
this
comments.
episode.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. Just
I do it all the
remember
time.
in 15
One of
to 20 years when some young kid comes along and does the same to you,
Yes.
that you did this to
Oh
them.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. One of our dearest coworkers is like 19, and I love him dearly, and he's the baby of our company, and it's just how it goes. It's fun. We get to poke fun at him. He told me today that he was born after 9/11, and I was just like, oh, I remember when that happened, and it's just like triggering. Yeah. Okay, so last question. What is your favorite ink color to play and why? So I'll start. I love Emerald. It's not in my current deck, but I think that ink has a lot of really, really fun abilities, whether it be bouncing a card back to your hand or finding a way to. I don't think there's direct removal. I think it's just bringing it back to your hand. But also with the evasives, like there's just a lot of options, and I think that like Cusco, Mad Hatter, like these, or Corella even, like these are fun cards to play with really like interesting abilities where, you know, you might not see something like that in the rest of the sets. That's my 2 cents. Brandon?
Yeah, so I originally was a Ruby boy. I really liked all the evasive stuff. I liked the lore stealing going on and that sort of thing, but I won't play Ruby Amethyst, and I can't find any other like shell for Ruby to work in. But the more that I've played Amber, I've loved Amber, and like if you couldn't tell, I'm a huge Stitch fan. And so, like,
Yeah.
Stitch being in that ink, I just have so much fun, like, playing all the cards. The whole ink is basically, like, play all your buddies and support each other and, like, win. And it's just so fun. So, like, I've really been enjoying Amber lately.
Okay. Teddy?
More than like I listened to Brandon talk, I realized we are the polar opposites in our play styles. Because I don't like playing Amber, but I love playing Ruby. In the fact that control is something I love. And like going back to like Pokemon, like the mill decks, that was something I loved to play.
Sure.
I loved doing that stuff. And obviously, like, mill isn't a thing in Lorcana, but control is, and Ruby
Not yet.
has that control. Not yet. I personally. That's a whole. I think it's I think it would be terrible for the game, but that's a whole different topic of conversation. But Ruby, I think it's just like the control, like the removal it has, the ability to just do. Like, you are able to you give your opponent the false sliver of hope that they're gonna win, and then bam, you take that right away from them, and you're just able to kind of like just. Once you hit that ground, once you played like the be prepared and you hit the ground running, and obviously like with paired with Amethyst is really good, and I think paired with Sapphire is going to be good in the next set. But then just be like that color, I think it's really good, and I think like you see the Minnie Mouse from this set. That's going to be a really good card, or from Rise of the Flowborn. That's going to be a really good card, and so I think Ruby is definitely where I'd sit right now.
Okay. Ben?
Yeah. For me, it's pretty solidly Steel, because like it does everything. Like it's got removal, it's got card draw, it's got big beefy bodies. Like anything that you're looking for, it's there in some capacity, and not even in a particularly bad version of it. It's like Tink is an absolute powerhouse. Like Tink's swords is just gross, and it's all one color. Like it's there's so much raw power there. I'm very curious to see if they're going to keep that up, if like maybe Steel being this strong is like a fluke of this set, or if it's actually going to just always have like this kind of access to most everything in the game. I kind of like that like jack of all trades, master of none concept, but at least for right now, it feels like it's mastering a few things. So
There you go.
Yeah. Good answer. Good answers all around, and everyone was different too. I love that when it's not just everyone being like, oh, the same. And that's why I think having multiple personalities, people having the different opinions is a really good thing when it comes to games like these, because then everyone gets a little taste of knowledge. Um, so I think that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for being here, for educating us, for educating the audience. We really, really appreciated this. It was really fun having you guys on. Please feel free to plug anything. Brandon, where can we find you? What do you do? All that jazz.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you guys for inviting us on. This was awesome. I had a great time. You can find me on YouTube at BSquared24. If you type in BSquared24 and then Lorcana, my channel should pop up. And I'm also on Twitter at BSquared24, capital Y, capital T. And then in Discord, you can find me in the Lorcana HQ Discord. It's a big hub for a lot of people that like Lorcana. You can probably find me there. I help moderate that Discord too. So if you ever need to contact me, DMs are open. Don't be afraid. I'm usually available.
And Teddy?
Yeah, so obviously, like I said earlier, whoa, English, please. You can find Glimmer Gang Pod everywhere: Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I believe we have a Threads,
You guys
but I don't
TikTok.
really. Yeah, we've dabbled. We even have a Threads, but I don't know how much. I don't remember the last time I logged into that.
Fair.
But our Twitter is like, you'll see me running around there. I'll be talking through that. I also personally have a Twitter called Tedstertainment. It's just, if you look up that, it should come up. And then, yeah, so Glimmer Gang, like I said, just competitive. That's what we focus on. We do weekly podcasts with different content creators and different people in the community talking different things. We just released one with Brandon talking about casting that just came out today. And then we have another one talking about card advantage coming out here soon. So yeah, if you are interested in the competitive side of Lorcana, come check us out. It's a great time. We all love the four of us, me, Sean, Spencer, and Blake. We all love talking about the competitive side of the game.
Awesome. Yeah, so again, thank you guys so much. Thank you to the WIGS who asked us to do this video. All of our shows are supported by them. Head over to our Patreon. I think it's just WWNT WIGS, but I can figure that out later.
It's just patreon.com/WDWNT.
There you go. We work here for like 10 years. So it's
Yep.
fine. We know what it is.
Plus, we've got the Discord that's open. Everybody come hang out there as well.
Yep.
Links should be up on the website.
Exactly. So again, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below. If you have any questions, always hit us up on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. We're always around and we're always happy to chat with people. So thank you so much and have a great night.
Let us know what character from the next set, we've got what, Raya, Winnie the Pooh, Zootopia.
Yeah.
Pick a character from one of those and design a card for it down in the comments, and we'll rate them.
That's cute. That's cute. I like that. Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a great night. Bye.
Bye.